You're listening to the SeoulWeaver podcast, and you're about to get interlaced. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the SeoulWeaver podcast, where you get interlaced. I am your host, Will Brooks, and I'm coming to you from right smack dab in the middle of Seoul. And we're doing something a little bit different on the SeoulWeaver podcast today. We're going to go ahead and do it live. We're doing a Facebook Live episode, so to speak. So I'm recording in GarageBand and broadcasting on Facebook Live because I do such a great job on the show. I thought it'd be a great idea to just do it live. That's yeah, nothing to lose there. That's sarcasm, by the way. It's not a good idea to do it live. I don't do a great job on the show. There's so many things that get cut out of the SeoulWeaver podcast when I go ahead and edit out the audio in GarageBand. But, well, it doesn't matter. So I think the topic of today kind of shows that it could always be a lot worse. I mean, things could be on a lot worse end. Let me go ahead and double check my audio on the actual podcast. So today I actually had something special planned. I was gonna go ahead and do a podcast. I was gonna cover this topic with an NPR representative or NPR correspondent, and we had things lined up, and she got sick and then got behind on work, and it didn't end up taking place. So I really wanted to do something special. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I got a little bit of extra time. I'm on vacation for the next week, and it just seems like a great time to go ahead and try things out. So I went ahead and said, let's go ahead and do this live. This Be Live thing popped up. I saw it on Facebook Live a few weeks ago, and I don't know, it looked good. It looked cool. I saw someone using it, and I'm a little curious whether my audio is coming through on the actual Be Live broadcast. I hope so. Otherwise, it's going to be a whole broadcast of Facebook Live with no sound, which is less than cool. But let me go ahead and double check this really quickly. But I guess I'll still continue. Yeah. So since we couldn't get the people on or get the person on, the guest on to kind of go and cover this, because this President Park scandal was pretty intense, to say the least, in how many different moving parts it has and things like that. I figured I'd go ahead and just do it live and let you guys know, or kind of tell you guys the story as it unfolded from my perspective or from my point of view. And it's not any less dramatic in what I understand, but I am missing some pieces. And I don't know if anybody out there is watching this, or if anybody's catching this and they're hearing and they're hearing something that they're not tracking, or I'm leaving some parts out. Go ahead and chime in. Let me know, and feel free to chime in and just give your own opinion or give your own feedback on what happened. So this President Park scandal has been definitely dominating the news, and it's caused a lot of huge protest in downtown Seoul, or at Seoul City Hall. Just a ton of things going on. It's been a little messy, so to speak. But to be completely honest, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, the protests have been peaceful for vast majority of the most part. People were able to bring their kids to the protest and kind of show them what democracy looks like, what it looks like to stand up for what you believe in. And truly turned out to be the outcome is that in the end the people's, I guess, the opinion of the people was considered when they looked at what to do with President Park. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me go ahead and go back. I got some notes because I need notes. I need bullet points. But I do have some bullet points on what happened, the order at which everything was kind of came forward and was unveiled, how everything rolled out from my view, because it was pretty It's pretty extensive. It started off as benign, something I didn't pay much attention to, and ended up with the South Korean president getting impeached, or the decision to impeach the South Korean president. That she's still not impeached. There's still a lot that needs to happen, but it did end up pretty. It ended up being a big deal. So back in mid-October, I'd say mid-October, the story started breaking. But the story was just the students at Ewha University, it's a women's university here in Seoul, they were protesting the unfair treatment of one particular student. And unfair in a good way. Like the student wasn't, her attendance was bad, the projects were subpar, and she was getting good grades. And even her admission was, her college admission was in question. And they were all kind of protesting because this particular student happened to be the daughter of a close friend and confidant of President Park, of the South Korean president. So I of course was like, hey, this is, I just went into the regular, I hate it when these elitists go through this, or hate it when these elitists just take advantage. They're already in an advantage in life because they happen to be born into a family that has a lot of pull, but I hate it. I mean, they already get enough advantages. Don't cheat where you probably don't even need to cheat, or where in situations, just making it harder for everyone else. I went on my rant about how elitism is a problem, and I kind of left it at that. But even part of me back then, was a little, I felt a little, what do I want to call it? Like I don't know the person that they're talking about. So how do I know that she wasn't qualified and that she didn't, maybe people are wrongly accusing her of doing something that they just, I don't know. It could be, I didn't know the whole story. So it could be unfair treatment of that person by the actual students. It could be overreacting, but I didn't know the whole story. Turns out this wasn't even the start of the whole thing, but this was the start from my end. It all goes back to 2000. It's still kind of centered around this same girl. This is Chae Sun-shil's daughter, and you'll hear her name over and over again. But it started back in 2014 when she lost this local, or these Asian games or Asian competition of horseback riding, and her mother she didn't lose, she got second place, and her mother made a big stink. And it, got people fired, and used her influence to kind of move people around and get the people that she wants in charge of these different agencies that were in charge of sports and education and things like that. But that kind of slid under the rug until the protest in the Ewha started, until that happened, and then people started looking into Chae Sun-shil and looking into her relationship with President Park, and it started to get way out of control. So the next thing, this is week one. I guess I'll try to go in order of week one, week two, and so on. So the next thing I heard from my end was it was Chae Sun-shil fleeing the country. So the girl who was admitted to the college that shouldn't have been admitted and was doing subpar work, getting special treatment, her mother was fleeing the country. And I remember thinking, like, it's a bit of an overreaction, right? Like, she just got her daughter into college and said, there's got to be more to the story. There's got to be a lot more going on, because why would she flee the country? It doesn't make any sense. And I almost got to the point where I felt where I was feeling sorry. I said, something like this shouldn't end in someone having to leave their country. That's a little crazy. But if she's friends with the president, she had enough pull to get her daughter into, just by association, get her daughter into Ewha. Because, I mean, what's going on is people are finding out what her daughter's relationship is, who her mother is, and they already know from a long time of history, and we'll get into that a little bit, how close she is to the president, and how, like, that she's the president's confidant, and how she plays a major role in what the president does. That role was to be revealed a little bit more later. So when she fled the country, and it was a little, that's when people started looking into what she does. And that's when I started to hear a little bit more about how what her relationship with the president was. And so all it really was but not to minimize what she was doing, but she was kind of running, it seemed to me like she was running an extortion scheme. Like, she was taking her relationship with the president and going and doing whatever it was. Or she'd go and lobby to other countries and kind of like get money, siphon money out of these big, huge conglomerates in Korea who are not used to being bullied around. And she would just take their money to her. She had an organization, nonprofit, that was supposed to, I believe it's nonprofit, that's supposed to go and, I don't know, use that money to spread sports around. I'm not sure what the actual the mission of the organization that she ran is, but she had her organization. That organization got mad donations from all these chaebols, all these huge conglomerates in Korea, and they just donate these insane amounts of money to them. And so she had a lot of pull amongst these companies. These companies have a lot of pull in Korea, and that creates a lot of power. That money and that pull created a lot of power for her, and she exerted it like, in a lot of cases when she didn't see things going her way, she exerted it a lot of way. I'll say, hang on one quick second. There's not any sound coming through. So, yeah, I'll continue on. So where was I? I was back. I was on, I was on Chae Sun-sil leaving the country and fleeing in her mad dash to get out of the country. She made the mistake of leaving a laptop behind, and I guess from what I understand, she actually got with her apartment security or someone who works for her apartment building, or however it is. We usually have security guards here. I'm not sure how it is once you get up to the level where you're extorting Samsung and LG and those guys. You probably have something a little more high tech or a little more elite. But there's people that work for the building, and it seems like she left her laptop with the people who work for the building. What that then led to is her laptop getting in the hands of a reporter from one of the local news sites, a JTVC reporter. And so they were able to get into her laptop, and they thought for sure that really they thought they wouldn't be able to get into it, or if they could get into it, everything would be wiped, or there wouldn't be anything just available to her there, but or available to see that would really incriminate her. But to their surprise, there was a lot of data on her actual laptop. So before this point, it really wasn't all that bad. I mean, everything that had led up to this point suggested that Chae Sun-sil had some influence over President Park. I mean, it's just significant influence, helping her out with speeches and helping her out with understanding policy, I guess, or foreign policy. And honestly, it didn't seem that bad. I mean, it seemed a little suspect. You don't really like somebody kind of helping, making decisions for the country when you didn't vote them into office or anything like that. But to a certain extent, I would expect if I was running the country and my best friend was around, I would definitely, he's my best friend. He's the closest person to me. I would definitely go through and ask his opinion on certain things and get his advice on certain things. So some of that I really didn't pay much attention to. But once they found this laptop, it became pretty evident that I think this is where it went from just being kind of slight influence to being all out, like she's sharing secret documents, because they found classified documentation. They found a lot of speeches, a lot of information, because she, in order for her to help President Park make these decisions, she had to know what was going on. Basically, she had to have a little influence or have a little background information. And then you found you had these speech writers that were given all this, had all this training and all this money, all this intelligence that, were writing her speeches up, and she'd get the speeches and send them over to Chae Sun-sil to rewrite or reconfigure, and they come back a little messed. They come back a little goofy, and all these things going on. What it really turned out was that it went from she has influence over President Park to, possibly she has control over President Park. And that's where people started really getting worried about what was going on or what the relationship between the two was, because from what I understand, the way President Park ran things was kind of like dictator-ish, not really dictator, but she had an authoritarian rule. She kind of, not authoritarian rule. She had an authoritarian approach of leadership. So the way she led people, the way she led the country was she gave marching orders. She gave, her opinion, and she didn't, or not her opinion, but she gave her word on it, and then people just executed. And forgive me, I'm having a hard time like maneuvering around this microphone. But she kind of like gave the word, and everybody just executed from that point on. There wasn't much back and forth. There wasn't much of a democratic leadership style. She was the one in charge of what was going on, so she was the one calling the shots. And if somebody else was controlling her, or someone else had some significant influence, like to the point where you can border it on control, when everything she does, when they from anything from just simple speeches out about holidays and things like that, to tragedies like the Sewol area, which we'll get into in a minute, and then North Korean policy. So Chae Sun-sil had a lot of influence, and people really started digging into the relationship that President Park had with her. And then it went from there, from that laptop recovery that Chae Sun-sil really left in a bit of a blunder, to kind of, in her hurry to leave Korea. That's where the real proof started coming out. That's where people really started digging a lot deeper. And it turned out to be the jump off point of so many different things popping up afterwards. So of those different things, I think the biggest deep dive that people did into President Park after that was her relationship with Chae Sun-sil's father. And this is Chae Tae-min. I think he actually changed his name a couple of times. So he might be known by other names. But this is when things started to get spiral out of control and get a little out of control, and just it started to get bizarre. It went from being like a head scratcher to like, wow, this might be this is definitely worth looking into. Because once they started to look into Chae Tae-min, they started to find that President Park might not have been the best candidate for the presidency in the first place, because Chae Tae-min, through relationship with President Park's father, who ran Korea back in, I should have done my research on this. I forgot the exact years, but back in the 80s or 70s. Go with early 80s. Somebody jump in there and correct me if I'm wrong on that. But he ran Korea in the past, and he's seen in two lights from what I've seen in Korea. On one hand, people see him as an authoritarian and a dictator who used his military power and military might to control Korea. And that might be what he was in some cases. And I'm pretty sure he definitely, he held on to country. He ruled with an iron fist, and he held on to his leadership of the country through military rule until he was assassinated. I really should have done my research. Until he was assassinated. I can't remember what year it was. Goodness, I'm sorry. But on the other hand, people see him as the father of industrialization and the father of the Korean miracle, because he, through his economic policies, out came Samsung and Hyundai and these other chaebols, these other big companies, these other conglomerates that kind of paved the way for Korea to grow economically and kind of advance so fast. So, depending on who you talk to, he's a hero or a tyrant, and or you can talk to most people, he's probably both. And so, but through his connections is how Chae Tae-min met President Park. He really got some. He didn't get any real control over her or influence over her until the death of her mother. If you know President Park, her mother and her father were both assassinated. Her mother died in an assassination attempt on her father, and President Park then had to step in and fill the role of her mother, somewhat as first lady. And from that point, and then her father was assassinated shortly after, I think 3 years later. And so she lost both of her parents during her father's rule. And when her mother died, Chae Tae-min used his this is where the shamanistic religion kind of comes in. He was a religious leader who did kind of fortune telling / shamanistic / Ouija board type stuff, where he told President Park that he talked to her mother after she died, and she told him that she wanted him, Che Tae-min, to lead President Park to her rightful role as leader of the country. And this is back in the day when Korea is still going through this thing. President Park's father's still alive, and eventually it's kind of easy to understand how she could accept what he was saying. Well, leading the country is one thing. Talking to my dead mother is another thing. But the fact that she believed it makes some people a little more aware. And the fact that she went with it and she might still believe it now isn't impossible in people's eyes. So up until this point, Che Tae-min had minimal control over Princess Park at the time, because that's basically how she was treated. After her father died, though, because I think while he was alive, her father interfered with President Park and Che Tae-min's relationship, Park Chung-hae's relationship. But after he died, there was nothing to block Che Tae-min from really taking hold of President Park, or Princess Park at the time, and just really manipulating her and taking over her, not only her mind and physical being, but like her finances too, because she inherited a lot of her father's wealth, and Che Tae-min and Chae Sun-sil used that wealth throughout the years until President Park kind of got to the point where they can dress her up and sell her to the country as the president. So, and that's, I'm leaving out a lot right there. There's a lot of things that happen in between there. You've got President Park's brother and sister trying to get a hold of her, trying to get her from under Che Tae-min's thumb. And you got people encountering President Park and saying she has a mentality of a middle schooler, even in her 30s, and so many different things that were going on with the president that slowly started to come out because of this Chae Sun-sil scandal. And so all of it kind of pointed to the possibility that Chae Sun-sil might be controlling President Park. And then, there was a lot of corruption going on. There's a lot of the cabinets knew about the control that Chae Sun-sil had, and the conglomerates knew what they I won't say they knew, but it became an issue, because if they did know, they were playing alone. They were allowing somebody who wasn't really elected by the people to make serious choices or serious decisions on behalf of the people. And it was not elected official, just a associate of the president. And so things started to get really, this is when things started to spin out of control, and you started getting the protests. This is when President Park's popularity or approval rating dropped below. She had a solid approval rating of about 40%. And this is when it for the first time ever, it dropped below that 40% to, in some cases, and depending on which polls you were looking at, it dropped to like 5%, 3% in some cases, where only the diehard fans or diehard supporters were actually still supporting her. It's an interesting thing about this is that usually this kind of showed how regionalism plays a huge role in Korean politics and things like that. Just because she's from where she's from, the people down there usually just support her. But even this incident, this scandal, kind of broke that barrier, that foundation she had from down south supporters. It even got to the point where the people who really support her, diehard supporters, just turned off TVs. I know some people who have older parents from the previous generation who just said, "I'm not going to watch it. It's all fake. It's all a scandal." All those people out there that are protesting, because at this point there's 1 million plus protesters in City Hall. At this point, people are saying they're all being paid to protest. They're all being paid. There's North Korean spies involved, and so many different things. And it's no different from, it was kind of, to a certain extent, it was no different from what goes on or what went on in the U.S. with Donald Trump. It was just certain people were just diehard fans and things like that. Actually, there's very few parallels there. Now that I think about it, this would be cut out if I wasn't doing this live. But yeah, there were so many different issues popping up, and our approval rating was dropping, and people were out there protesting, calling for her for her to step down, basically. So that's kind of when I kind of got into this a little bit. I mean, after the relationship with Che Tae-min and the relationship with Che Sun-shil and President Park, after all that came out, people started really going into her psyche and looking at her actions, and they really just started to dissect President Park on a level that they hadn't done. That would usually happen before an election, I would think, definitely in the U.S. They hit her with this dissection that would happen usually, that just didn't happen before she came into office, and people started questioning her psyche and going into what she really thinks about Korea and how she really feels about Korea. I read a couple of articles that talked about how she felt. They're pretty sure she felt like she was the rightful heir to Korea, and Korea was hers by sheer heiress, I guess, or by sheer, it should be passed down to her fathers who made the country what it is today. And she thought that would in turn give her ownership of the chaebols and ownership of these conglomerates and semi ownership of what they are today belongs to her. So technically, if she has somebody going and extorting money from them in her name, it's not really extortion because they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for her father. Anyway, so many different things I read about it, and this is why I really wanted to get somebody else on a podcast to kind of give another opinion, because I'm really just regurgitating what I've read from other people, and I would like to see what somebody, and I didn't really read extensively into every aspect of what's going on. I didn't read 4 or 5 different articles on her psyche and on what she's done, and had my wife go ahead and give me some feedback on what was going on in these Korean documentaries where they were explaining what was going on, because it got really hard to separate fact from fiction, or fact from fantasy, because people just started making things up, man. Like people, well, I don't know if they started making things up, but stories just got more and more outrageous. And I kid you not, I almost said it. I kid you not, it became more twisted and more, just more dramatic than Korean drama. Who needed Korean drama if you got a president that is going through all this stuff right here? So when they got into looking at President Park's actions, you started hearing things that even I was, I don't know if I don't have an opinion in this whole thing. I'll sum up with my opinion in a moment, but I think they got to the point where they were really nitpicking on everything she did. But there was a disappearance for 7 hours after the sinking of the Sewol ferry. And if you don't know about the Sewol ferry, I'll go ahead and I'll find a link, and I'll go ahead and come back and leave it in the comments. But the ferry sunk, and almost 300 people ended up dying. A lot of them were high school students on a field trip, and they couldn't find President Park's location after the sinking of the ferry, or during the sinking of the ferry, is unknown. Like, no one knows where she was for 7 hours. And excuse me, another thing that would normally be cut out in the podcast. But in the end, they can't account for her whereabouts after she found out that the ferry was sinking. And that's kind of the toss up between it, because you don't know whether she was, I don't think I've seen whether she was actually notified and then disappeared, or if she disappeared and was notified and just didn't come back. But they're saying that she disappeared after being notified to go get something cosmetic done, some medical attention, maybe some corrective surgery or something along those lines. And people are furious about it. They're very upset, because they're saying, you found out about this tragedy. You shouldn't be doing what you do. You shouldn't be living life as a core. This is your people who died. You shouldn't be living life as if nothing happened and going on. And someone like we would say, I guess it would be the equivalent of President Bush going golfing after he found out about September 11th. But, and that's an oversimplification, but yeah, they were upset after that. And, they're upset that happened. And then you get people on her side saying, she's a woman, you can't dig into her medical history like that. And I work in a hospital. You can't dig into her medical history because of patient information violations, although I don't know if that exists in Korea. But yeah, just all these different things, and they really got to dissecting government purchases. I think, honestly, someone asked me if when they heard that President Park was getting impeached, or that the decision was made to impeach her, they asked if she got head in the Oval Office like Bill Clinton. And there are a few people who can who would say they can't confirm or deny this, because they started looking at government purchases and they found Viagra on government purposes, as purchased with government funds. And you got some people saying they bought it because it helps with elevation or sickness, motion sickness at certain elevations. But just different people saying that, because they were buying Viagra, they were having like wild sex parties, and just so many different things that I can't begin to explain. So in the end, President Park, despite her apologies, she came out a few weeks ago. And if you actually see what I share if you actually saw me share it on Facebook or the SeoulWeaver Facebook group, she came out and said she'd step down if the National Assembly or Parliament decided that's what she should do. And so they had a vote, and that is what they decided that she should do. She should be impeached. But that doesn't mean that everything stops right now, that she's just gone. President Park still is president. There's still a lot of steps that have to be taken to actually go through with the impeachment. Something about the Supreme Court, and they have to get like 6 out of 7 or 7 out of 8 people members of the Supreme Court have to agree with the decision. So many different things have to happen. And I think the people have been heard, but there's still a lot that can go wrong to where President Park is allowed to. There's still a lot of avenues where I don't want to say right or wrong, but there's still a lot of avenues where things can change, and President Park can actually go ahead and finish out her term, which is only a year. So I don't think anyone at this point wants to go through. So in the meantime, Samsung and LG, I don't know if LG is one of these companies, but these different conglomerates are going through, they're going through investigation to see what all happened with Chase Unshield, whether they knew that they were donating money to, as a corruption scheme, or whether corruption was the actual foundation of these donations that they gave to Chase Unshield's organization. Chase Unshield has already admitted guilt, but I think she's kind of backtracking and saying that she wasn't really exporting or exploiting her relationship with President Park. These companies knew what they were doing, and so many different people. There's so many different things going on to where they're trying to figure out who's at fault for this. President Park's entire cabinet has been got disconnected there. Let me see if we come back. So yeah, my apologies. This is pretty cool, but this first time thing was probably could have used a bit of a test. But yeah, so to sum up, there's still a lot of different avenues or a lot of different things that can take place that will leave President Park in power for the next year. All in all, I think this was a great experience for me. I think this was a great experience for Korea. There are a couple of things that I hope Korea gets out of this, because I think there were some aspects of their political scheme or their political environment that that this may help in. It definitely shows a positive there's positive outcomes from this. And I hope that the regionalistic aspect of politics kind of it's addressed in this. I hope people really go and dissect I hope this leads people to go and really look at presidential candidates before they get elected and see what their background is. Because I think when you really look at it, there were a few red flags on President Park that, again, I don't want to go in and say whether it's right or wrong, but I do want to say that there are things that probably would have come up previously had they really looked into it and had they really vetted her. Another thing I think was, and on a positive note, I hope people really take what happened with this occurrence, the protesting week by week, and the lack of violence. I think the protest, my favorite part of the protests were the fact that they were nonviolent, and they were, even though people were out there demanding for the resignation of the president, they were still singing songs, doing these candlelight visuals. They were just visuals. And they were just, it was peaceful. And I think that's the most important part of this. I think the world can learn from Korea and the way this went. The peaceful protest led to them hopefully getting what the people wanted, what the vast majority of people want. And it was inspiring. I mean, it was great. I don't think in America you can get 2 million people in one place and have very few clashes of violence. I think I remember seeing 1 or 2 incidents where people were kind of getting a little heated and getting upset and getting and actually getting ready to throw punches and things like that, physical confrontations. But there weren't any. There was, considering that they protested in the 1 point above 1 million people for probably about 3. I think it was 2 million people by the time it was done, and you just didn't hear these incidents where people were getting trampled to death or anything like that. And I think it was, again, very, very inspiring. So, but as a friend of mine said, finally we can go back to Myeongdong, because I think that a whole area was just booked up with people. You crowded, you couldn't even make it out there. So I'll be pretty happy when things get back to just being normally insanely crowded, as opposed to just ridiculously people from all over Korea are packed in this one district in Seoul. So yeah, that's all I got, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. We're gonna end the podcast here. I might hang out on Be Live a little while longer, just to see if I can go ahead and make this, I don't know, just to kind of BS. I got a little bit more time, and go ahead and hang out till the kid and wife get home. And I'll be seeing you guys around. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram @SeoulWeaver. Check us out on the Facebook, the SeoulWeavers Facebook group, the SeoulWeavers Facebook page. Just search for us on SeoulWeaver, and we'll be seeing you guys around. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll be back for the next SeoulWeaver podcast.